Hello.
Hi, Shavua Tov.
Hello.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Bernie, how are you?
Do
Good.
people realize that it's 8:30?
8:30.
Everybody was informed.
Okay. I couldn't even find a Danielle. I had to, Bernie had a Danielle.
Yeah, just before Ezra Nehemiah and
Yes, I have it.
Yomim.
Yeah, I have it in the bolt, not separately, but part of,
We have the Art Scroll 1 volume.
Right,
Tanakh
exactly.
with it in the back.
right, the stone,
Daniel.
the stone edition.
It's Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah,
Mhm.
only one volume.
Okay. Yeah. Do people want to switch it to Sunday or want to leave it Saturday
I
night?
don't know. He says, I actually saw him for our Shir Davion in Shul, and he says 8:30, so.
Oh, he's here now. Mhm.
Until it gets later, the Shabbos, and then it'll probably go to Sunday.
Mhm.
There he is. He'll tell us.
Hi.
Hi, Shavua Tov.
Oh my gosh.
What is this? She completed her half marathon.
They usually will be on Sunday.
Are we switching to
Yeah.
Sunday or leaving it?
It was on the marathon.
Yeah. No, she ran it in Ashkelon.
Yeah, so we are gonna go to Sunday at 8 o'clock. That's been a request by most people. They find it's late Motzei Shabbos. So next week, we will continue this Sunday night at 8 o'clock.
Unless there's something.
All right.
Oh, this is all English?
Let's let the troops gather a little bit. Remind everybody who hasn't voted for the World Zionist Organization, vote oic.org,
5.
slate
Say
5.
5.
Okay. So Tanakh, the word Tanakh, is Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. So we, Nevi'im, are divided into what's called Nevi'im Rishonim and Nevi'im Achronim. We completed what's called Nevi'im Rishonim, which is Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, and Malachim. That is considered Nevi'im Rishonim. Nevi'im Achronim is Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, and Kreasar. And those are the later Nevi'im. That's how Nevi'im is divided up.
Wait.
Sefer Daniel is in a section of Tanakh called Ksuvim. So the question we first have to deal with is, and all the other Sfarim that we know, Mishlei, Iyuv, the Chamesh Megillot, Sefer Tehillim, Ezra, Nehemiah, these are all in what's called Ksuvim. So the question is that we have to deal with tonight, what is the difference between Nevi'im and Ksuvim? So let's start our analysis in the Gemara Baba Basra, famous Gemara, Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. Tana Rabbana, Sidran Shel Nevi'im. What's the order of Nevi'im? Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim. Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya, Ushnei Masar. So that's Nevi'im. Sidran Shel Ksuvim. What's the order of Ksuvim? Rus, Well, that makes sense because Rus precedes David HaMelech, right? Because Rus is the great grandmother of David HaMelech. So you have Rus and then Sefer Tehillim. Iyuv. Now we're going to have to, who wrote Iyuv? Well, according to most opinions, it's Moshe Rabbeinu. Well, based on the analysis we just did, maybe Iyuv should have been before Rus, because chronologically Moshe lived before Rus. But anyways, this is what the Gemara says. Rus, Sefer Tehillim, Iyuv, Mishlei. Well, this fits our theme, because
It's Shlomo.
who wrote Mishlei? Shlomo. Kohelet, Shira Shirim,
Shlomo.
right? Kohelet, Shira Shirim, right? Still Shlomo. So that fits our chronology. Then the keynote is Megillas Eicha, written by Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Daniel, Megillas Esther, Udivrei Hayomi. Umi Kosvan. Who wrote these things? Moshe Kosov Sifro, Uparshas Bilam, the Iyuv. Yoshua Kosov Sifro, Ushmona Psukim Shabbator. The last 8 Psukim. After it says that Moshe Rabbeinu died, well, who wrote those? So it's machlokas. Some say Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it with his tears. Others say, based on this Gemara, that was written by Yoshua. Shmuel Kosov Sifro, Shoftim Verus. David Kosov Sefer Tehillim, Ayidei Asar Zakenim. David had help. Ayidei Adam Arishon, Ayidei Malki Tzedek Melech Sholem, Ayidei Avram, Ayidei Moshe, right? We have Tefillah LeMoshe, Ayidei Haman, Ayidei Yedutun, because there are a number of Tehillims authored by Haman and Yedutun, Ayidei Asaf, Ayidei Shlosha B'nei Korach, where it says Mizmor L'Bnei Korach. Okay. Yirmiyahu Kosov Sifro, the Sefer Malachim, which we've been talking about all along. Chizkiah V'Siyato, Chizkiah and his base medrash, Kosvu Yeshayahu, Mishlei Shir Hashirim V'Kohelet. Anshe Knesset Agdola Kosvu Yechezkel, Ushnei Masar, Daniel, Umegillas Esther. So right now we're being told that Daniel was written by Anshe Knesset Agdola. Then it says Ezra Kosov Sifro, V'Yachashul Devramim Adlo, and he also wrote Divrei Yomim. And in the time of there was a time where both Ezra and Nehemiah were called as Sefer Ezra. Then later on, it was divided, and it's called Ezra Nehemiah. Now, this Gemara doesn't yet give us an insight in the question we started off with. What is the difference between Nevi'im and Ksuvim? So Rav Yochanan Omar, HaNevi'im ve'aksuvim osidin libotel. These books will be nullified. However, Chamesha Sifrei Torah ein osidin libotel. The 5 books of Moses, this is the Talmud Yerushalmi, Megillah, Daf Zayin. The Chamisha Sifrei Torah will not be misbotel. My time, it says by Har Sinai Kol Gadol V'lo Yasav, that there was a great noise that never stopped, and that refers to the Chamisha Chimshei Torah. Reish Lakish Amar Af Megillas Esther, Einon Asidin Libotel. Megillas Esther also will remain. Okay. It says in the Rambam Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Megillah, Mutar l'dabek Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim b'krach echad. You can put together a book that has Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim. Umeiniach b'kol chumash v'chumash arba shitin. This gives us the various laws of how much space you need between various parshios and very Torah. And he goes through the same. The Siduran shel Nevi'im, he says Yoshua through Treyasar, V'Seder Aksuvim, he gives the same list as the Gemara. It says, Kol kisvei HaKodesh en koisvin oson el b'shirtut. You have to make lines. All of the 24 books of the Tanakh have to be written with lines. The Rambam codifies Bahalacha. Kol Sifrei Nevi'im v'kol Aksuvim asidin libotel limos HaMashiach chutz Megillas Esther. And the only which will karem is Chamisha Chumshei Torah. And the halachos of Torah Shebal Peh, she'enon betelin la'olam. Now, says the Sefer Chasidim, la'achar shemeisu neviim achroinim. After the Nevi'im, the last Nevi'im died, mikan va'elech lo nisna le'elyonim reshus v'lo letachtonim laharbos posuk echad. You can't add anything more to Tanakh. Hamalachim lo yosivu posuk echad kod pligi botrein malachi barakia. We have in the Gemara many times that the two malachim and Shemaim are arguing. Mibnei shelo achar shepasku haneviyim lo nitin lekosov posuk echad v'lo os echad. After the Nevi'im died, we have no ability to write a posuk or a letter. It says in Mishlei al Tosef al Dvarav. Lekachasu masoret michav dalet sforim. So once the 24 sforim was codified by the Gemara, we don't have any more sforim. Now, it says in Divrei Yomim, Halohem ksuvim al Divrei Achoyzeh. So he says, Anshe Knesses Agdola Omru Mashahutzruchu Lidrosh Kvar. The Ein Navi Rishai Lechadesh Dover Al Chavta Sforim. The Anshe Knesses Agdola were the last word. Not even a Malach, not even Eliyahu. Says the Rabbeinu Bechai, a Rishon. Lo chamisha chumshei Torah bilvad, ela afilu neviim uksuvim kibla Moshe b'Sinai. Shlakach nikra neviim uksuvim divrei Kabbalah. We received them sort of as a Kabbalah. Al shem shayu mukubolim uvoy b'mos Moshe. Ela shlo nitin reshus likosev. It wasn't given permission to writing until, for example, Chizkiah or Anshe Knesses Agdola or Yirmiyahu. Ad shebao neviim shebedoros the kosvum beruach hakodesh. Now we're going to see this term, ruach hakodesh, as the defining term. What separates between Sifrei Nevi'im and Sifrei Ksuvim? That the Sifrei Nevi'im were written b'Neviah, but the others were written only beruach hakodesh. Says the Maral. Well, there's a difference between Nevuah is a higher level, and Ruach HaKodesh is not Nevuah. It's on a lower level. Says the Maral. Ki Nevi'im uksuvim afal gav shekol advorim shebehem emes gomor. Everything in there is emes. Mikol mokom ikar Nevi'im uksuvim shashem yizborach maniget olamo mitzad chesed. This is the way Hashem conducts His world with chesed. Umitzad chesed yesh kates v'sof. Rak hayosher ein los hefsek. Kemo chamisha chumshei Torah. Asher kol hamitzvos yesh b'hem hayosher kemo shamanu l'mala. He's giving us the reason why the chamisha chumshei Torah will remain forever. The Nevi'im uksuvim have a kates v'sof. Aval Nevi'im, av ki heimin Hashem yizborach, mikol mokom einam min Hashem yizborach rak kafi mashu roi mitzad ha'olu, hu ha'adam. It comes through a Navi, through a person. Ukfi masav shel adam. Al zeh ba'u Nevi'im lo'ochiach otam. The Nevi'im came to give tochacha to the people. Rak ha'Torah hi ha'seder min Hashem yizborach, uleficha chamisha chumshei Torah ein asidin le'idbotel. That's why the 5 books will not be nullified. Says the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, Anshe Knesses Agdola Hizdiru Tanakh. They were the ones who formulated the Tanakh. Uvetihilim Shechubal Yedei David HaMelech Beruach HaKodesh. Sidru gam shar dvarim shechur b'al yedei anoshim Baruch HaKodesh. There are other things in Sefer Tehillim that was also said Baruch HaKodesh by people other than David HaMelech. Like the Kisvu Barosham Shem HaMechaber, like Lam Natzech Livnei Korach, or Tefillah LaMoshe. V'chein asfu b'mishlei chochmos u'musar lavodas Hashem. So too, the Anshe Knesset Agdola gathered the wisdom that we have in Masorah was written by Shlomo HaMelech, but it was formally written down by the Anshe Knesset Agdola. Okay, wanted to start,
Can I ask a question, Ernie?
please,
Yes?
if I can answer it.
I've heard all these the Ksuvim and Nevi'im are going to be Batel and Moshe Mashiach, but no explanation is given for why. No, I didn't hear one single one mentioned.
I did. I said the Maral here. I'll read it slower. Let's see if we understand it. Nevi'im uksuvim afagav shekol advorim shebahem emes gomer. Mikol mokom ikar nevi'im uksuvim sheshem yizbarach maniges olamo mitzad hachesed. Umitzad hachesed yesh kates v'sof. These were written through Hashem Yisbarach, who is conducting the world. So he sent Nevi'im to give Tochacha because Hashem is a Rachum v'Chanun with Chesed. But there's Kates v'Sof to that. That ends. Rak HaYosher Ein Lo Hefsek. Yosher means straightfulness. You know, like we say Glat Kosher and Glat Yosher, right? Glat kosher means something that's kosher. But there's beyond kosher. It's glat yosher. You have to be honest with people. So yashrus means straightness. Means being yashar,
Integrity.
not crooked. Not crooked.
Integrity.
So he says, Kimo chamisha chum shetor asher kol ha-mitzvos yesh b'ma yashar. So that's why Torah doesn't go away, but the Tanakh will go away.
Even with Am Yisrael sinning, Egel HaZohav, and complaining throughout the time in the Midbar. So, I mean, they were less than completely, I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu obviously was pure, but Am Yisrael was not. But
So again, the Maral says, Aval Nevi'im af ki he min Hashem Yisborach, mikol mokom eino min Hashem Yisborach, rak kafi mashu roi mitzad ha'olul hu ha'adam. The Nevi'im and Ksuvim are written through the vehicle of a human being. The Torah was written directly from Hashem.
I understand. Thank you.
That's why Chamisha Chumshei Torah ein asidin libotel. Okay. So Daniel is placed, as we said, between Eicha and Megillah Esther, and then after them come Ezra and Nehemiah. That seems to fit our chronological order.
What about Rabbi Akiva that they added the tagging?
Yes, go ahead.
So that was much after the
He didn't add the Tagim. He explained the Tagim. He darshaned the Tagim. The Tagim were there, written B'Ksav Ashuri. Okay, on top of every letter, there is like an adornment called a tag. Chazal tell us Rabbi Akiva darshaned every tag. We don't even know one of them. We don't even know one of those drushes of Tagim. But the Tagim were there, Tzvi. He didn't add the Tagim. He just darshaned them. There are 357 psukim in Sefer Daniel. And the gematria of that is Kiruach Hashem Nishbavo, which is a pasuk in Yeshaya. Sefer Daniel is divided into two parts. The first part, we're going to have 12 prakim. The first half of Sefer Daniel, Perek Aleph to Vav, is called Sefer Amasim. These are the various historical things that happened during the time of Daniel. We're going to see that there were dreams that the various kings of Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar, Evil-Marduk, Daryavesh had, and Daniel interpreted those dreams. So those two subject matter, we're going to see, there are various events that happened. Hananin, Mishael, Azariah were thrown into a furnace. We just had this, it just so happened that the Daf Yomi, the last 2 days, are all the Agadata about Sefer Daniel. Amazing. They knew that we were starting Daniel tonight. Now, the second part is called Sefer HaChezionot. Daniel had visions. And he had visions of the next 2,000 years of history. He saw them, there were visions of 4 animals, and they're really the Daled Malchios, the 4 sort of empires that ruled over the world: Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman Empire. And there's going to be a 5th empire, which is the empire of the Jewish people once Mashiach comes. Then in the end of Daniel, the last perek, he talks about the Kates. He talks about the end of time. That's why so many Meforshim have investigated Sefer Daniel, because in it was predictions about the future. And that's going to come in the later half of the Sefer. So the Sefer, the first 6 prakim, we remember as we finished Sefer Malachim, Nebuchadnezzar carries off 3 different kings, the last 3 kings of Israel. These were all sons of Yoshio HaMelech. First Yehoiakim, and then Yechoniah, and then Tzidkiyahu. Then he had his son Evil-Marduk. The last few psukim of Malachim that we learned last week, he raised Melech Yechoniah out of prison. And then the last king of the Babylonians is Belshazzar. And there's a famous banquet, and there's writing on the wall, and Daniel is going to come to interpret the writing on the wall. When we say, oh, the writing is on the wall, that's a phraseology that means, oh, there's something about the future. The writing is on the wall about what's going to happen to such and such thing.
There.
It comes from Sefer Daniel when he interprets the writing on the wall at this famous banquet. We're going to see that most of the language in Daniel is in Aramaic. Now, why is that? Because the language that was spoken in Babylonia at that time was Aramaic. And also in the lands around the area. And therefore, a lot of the dialogue that goes on between Daniel and the various kings is going to be in Aramaic. Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah were brought when they were young men to Bavel to become, Nebuchadnezzar recognized that the Jews were smart. So he wanted to enroll them in his bureaucracy. And he began educating them when they were very young. And they were taught the language, they were taught science, and all of the wisdoms, how to conduct proper government. And Nebuchadnezzar was very impressed. He sent Daniel as a representative to many other nations around him. Daniel was almost like a viceroy. He was one of the 3 leading officers, as we're going to see, who helped Nebuchadnezzar conduct business in Babylonia. This led to a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. We're going to see Daniel and his friends did not want to eat unkosher food, even though they had to occupy themselves with the business in the palace, etc. They were moiser nefesh on Shmira Torah mitzvahs. But what do we see? This is the first time that the Jewish people have been exiled. So what's the first sefer that we learn? How to conduct yourself in exile by Daniel. Daniel is the flag bearer of how to conduct yourself. Of course, we're going to see that there was a idol set up. Everyone was supposed to bow down to the idol. Hanan and Mishav Azariah refused to bow down. They were thrown into the fiery furnace, but was saved by a malach. After Daryavish the Mede, he made a gzeira against doing tefillah. We'll see Daniel himself was sent into the lion's den and was saved from there. And the king, Nebuchadnezzar, took notice of this open miracle that occurred to both Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar gave commands that they should be fearful of the Jews, and that the God of the Jews is Kihu Elokim Chai V'Kayam La'olamim. These were words spoken by Nebuchadnezzar. By the way, these first 6 prakim take place over a long period of time. It says that Daniel was about 15 years old when he was brought, and he lived until he was 100. We're going to see that there are opinions that say that Daniel came back with Ezra when they built Bayis Sheni. And we'll see what the proofs of that are. Now let's deal with another question. Was Daniel himself a Navi? We know, we've already learned, that Sefer Daniel is included in Sefer Ksuvim. It was written Baruch HaKodesh, like we learned in the Rambam. So there is no argument that the Sefer Daniel is part of Ksuvim, not Nevi'im. We saw that in the Gemara we learned, we saw that in the Rambam. But we're going to see that Chazal asked, was Daniel a Navi or not? And if it was, what was the level of the Nevuah? Now, we see other Nevi'im, who we know were Nevi'im, yet their output are included in Ksuvim. For example, we know Shmuel is a Navi, right? Moshe v'Aaron b'Chohanav u'Shmuel b'Korei Shmo. Right? Shmuel clearly was a Navi. He wrote his Sefer, Shmuel Av Shmuel Beis, as a Navi. However, but he also wrote Megillas Rus. And we've clearly seen Rus is placed in Ksuvim. Yirmiyahu wrote his Sefer. He wrote Sefer Malachim. He wrote Sefer Yirmiyahu. But he's the author of Megillas Eicha, which we see are not included in the Sifrei Nevi'im, but rather they're in the Sifrei Ksuvim. So how do we understand this? So we're going to go through 6 or 7 points that also will help us define why something is in Ksuvim and other Sforim are in Nevi'im. To be a Navi, you had to be sent on Shlichus. You are Shaliach of Hashem. They have been commanded by Hashem to bring the word of Hashem to Bnei Yisrael. Well, there's an example. Yonah was told to bring his message to Nineveh, but to a great multitude, to Kahal Goyim. We don't see anywhere in Sefer Daniel where he was sent on a shlichus, or that his visions were told to a great multitude of Jews. Not only that, we're going to be seeing that at the end of those visions, he was told lisatem, ulechatem adei kates. He was specifically told not to reveal it, to close it, to keep it sosum. So right away we see a difference. The Nevi'im were told things to say out to the Jewish people. Yirmiyah was told to give tochacha. Yeshayahu, Chazon Yeshaya ben Amoz recognized that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. There is no shlichus in Sefer Daniel. Nowhere in Daniel is he called a Navi, not once. He's called a Chacham. It says, Hayeladima elu arba atam, these children who were four, Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel. Nasan lahem Elokim madav aseichel b'chol sefer v'chochma. It says, Daniel havin b'chol chazon v'chalamot, b'chol davar chochmas bina. Posuk in Daniel Yud Zayin. But it doesn't say he's a Navi. A few times Nebuchadnezzar says about Daniel, Ruach Elokin Kadishin, Mipa'embo. There's Ruach of Hashem, a Ruach HaKodesh that's pounding in his heart. But he's not called a Navi. That's point number 2. Point number 3. It doesn't say anywhere in Sefer Daniel directly that Hashem spoke to Daniel. There's malachim sent to him, right? The malachim that are sent to the Hanani, Mishael, Azariah to save them. Or there's a malach that is going to explain to Daniel his visions. But while he's awake, it doesn't say Dvar Hashem haya elav. There's no mention of Dvar Hashem like it is by Yechezkel and the other Nevi'im. Now, we're going to see that Daniel had tremendous visions of Hashem. He sees him with a white beard as an old man, which is similar to the visions l'chora of Yechezkel, right? Yechezkel Perak Aleph, the Meiser Merkava. And Yeshayahu saw that. Yeshayahu saw Hashem Yoshev al Kisei Ram V'Nisa, Usrafim Omdim Imalo, Perak Vav in Yeshaya. Yechezkel saw Demus Kisei, and he saw the picture of a kisei. There's an appearance of a person sitting on the kisei. And there are, whatever the chayos are, and whatever the ofanim are, I'm not a Kabbalist, they were surrounding this throne. So they saw visions. Daniel raw as atik yumin. He saw the ancient one, Yoshev al kisei. Kiso, Levusho Kasheleg, Usar Rosho Ketsemernaki, his beard was like white. Vuhudanet Kobailam. So we see visions that Daniel had that are similar to visions that Yeshaya and Yechezkel had. But you see, Daniel is not included among the Nevi'im. These visions that Daniel was zocha to, it wasn't that he should tell them to the people or to instruct them what to do. Like Amos and Zechariah were commanded to tell the people to do certain things. They also saw certain maros. The interpretations of these visions were told to Daniel. Basi la'agid ki chamudasata. You are beloved of Hashem. You are Daniel ish chamudos ki ata shalachti elecha. But it's to him. Nowhere does it say in Sefer Daniel that he is meant to reveal these to other Jews. To Yechezkel it says, Sholechani otcha el bnei Yisrael. Ata shaluach el bnei Yisrael. to those Nevi'im, it says specifically that I'm sending you to tell over these visions to Klal Yisrael. Daniel was not. We know there's a famous parak in Zechariah that we read on Shabbos Chanukah, where Zechariah is shown a vision of a menorah. And he says to the Malach, Ma Eila Adoni. He doesn't know what they are. And then the Malach tells him what it is. We're going to see Daniel asks the same questions. Hashem ma'achris eile. But the Malach Gavriel pushes him. Lech Daniel, ki stamim v'chatamim advarim ad eid kates. These things are closed and sealed until the end of time. There is no mention of the Shem Havaya, of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, in all of the various maros that Daniel saw. He uses the name of Hashem only when he davens on behalf of Klal Yisrael. In Daniel, it mentions Chazon or Mare, because sometimes we see in the Nevi'im they say that Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos. But in nowhere in the visions does it say that Hashem appears to him. It's either Malachim or Shluchim only. In all the Nevuas, where Malachim appear to them in a dream, none of the other Nevi'im call them by their name, except for Daniel. We're going to see Daniel calls them by their name. There's a vision that he sees of Malachim, and Daniel actually, except the only person who called them by a name is Daniel. We don't see that Daniel comes into contact with the great mass of Jews that have been exiled into Babylonia. He davens for them. He does vidui in their name, but he doesn't have direct contact with them. There's no direct musar directly given over to the people with all of what Daniel sees. That's really the point of a Navi, to be a shaliach to the people. There's a famous Gemara, Megillah Yudalad Amud Aleph. It says, Harbe Nevi'im Amdulam Yisrael, Kiflaim Kiyotze Mitzrayim. There were 1.2 million Nevi'im throughout Jewish history. But we're going to see there's only 48 Nevi'im that have been written down. El Nevuah Shehutzracha L'Doros Nichtava. Only the Nevuahs that have been needed for generations was it written. Rashi, how does Rashi say Hutzracha? There in Megillah. Lilmod Tshuva O Hora. To teach us somehow a way to do tshuva or to teach us something halacha. Therefore, there's really nothing in the Ksuvim and Daniel, there's no Tochas Musar directly to Klal Yisrael. We have to learn in his actions. We'll see that there's Musar in an indirect way. From the davening that he did, he davens that Klal Yisrael should be redeemed, that they should build Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. He tells them the various actions that caused the Churban. So we're able to learn Musar indirectly. I'm going to go over what those of us today in the Daf Yomi learned. The Gemara talks about that there were Anoshim who were with Daniel. It says plural, Anoshim, when Daniel saw one of his maros, when he saw one of his visions. The Gemara today says, who were these Anoshim? Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. The last three Nevi'im of Treasar. And the Pasuk says that only Daniel saw the vision, they didn't see it. So the Gemara asked, what is the difference between the three Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, and Daniel? So the Gemara answers, Inu adife minu, they were greater than him. The Iyu and Daniel adif minai were greater than them as well. That means each had an aspect that made them greater than the other. Inu adif minu, they were greater than him. Listen, the Inu Navi, they were greater than him because they were Nevi'im. The Ihu, meaning Daniel, lo Navi. So directly from the Gemara, it seems to suggest that Daniel was not a Navi. But Iyu Adif Minayu, he was greater than them. The Iyu Chaza, he saw the vision. The Inu lo Chaza. And they did not see it. So Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi were shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he was not sent to the Jewish people with any nevuah. Now, in Moira Nevuchim, which was written by the Rambam says, Ruach HaKodesh is b'musag harchav shel nevuah. Ruach HaKodesh is a shtickle of nevuah. And he lists 11 achadasrei malot shel nevuah. And I'm going to read what the Rambam says directly. He sheyargisha adam ki ilu dover machalbo, v'koach acher avar alav shemedovavo. A person feels a certain spirit come over him. Va'az yidaber b'divrei chachma o tehila. He's going to speak certain wisdom or praise, o b'divrei tochos mo'ilim, o b'dvar mediniim, or he'll speak something on politics or divinity. However, kol ze beheketz. He's awake. He has control of his senses. He's speaking Baruch HaKodesh. In this aspect, David HaMelech wrote Tehillim. V'chiber Shlomo Mishlei v'Kohelet v'Shir HaShirim. And Shlomo wrote his wisdom books in that spirit of Ruach HaKodesh. Says the Rambam, v'chein Daniel, v'Iyuv, v'divrei hayomim ushar ksuvim, v'chayotze b'zeh meruach HaKodesh nischabu. They were created with this darga of Ruach HaKodesh. Lefichach nikraim ksuvim. And that's why, instead of being called Nevi'im, they're called ksuvim. Kavanatam shein ksuvim beruach HaKodesh. Umima sheroy la'yer alav ki David u'Shlomo v'Daniel. So David, Shlomo, Daniel were in that category. Ve'enam misug Yeshayahu v'Yirmiyahu v'Nosan Hanavi v'Achiyah Shiloni v'Domeim. And they're not in the category of Yeshayah and Yirmiyahu regarding Nevuah. Lefi she'elu, kloimer David u'Shlomo v'Daniel, lo dibru v'omru ma she'omru ki im beruach HaKodesh. David and Shlomo v'Daniel spoke beruach HaKodesh, not the Lashon Nevuah.
They were awake, you just can't do that. Ernie, I got a question. I don't want to sound like a heretic, but how do you know that these visions like Yechezkel, how do you know that they talked about, I don't know, some form they saw? Did they think it's Hashem or an angel, or it's not a, because they're alluding to that they some kind of, I don't know, human form. I don't know. How do we know that wasn't like, I don't know, they imagined it?
So the
Yechezkel, whoever, they saw this
right.
man,
So
the beard, whatever.
the first parak of Yechezkel is what's called Maaseh Merkava.
Mhm.
There are two sort of the secret, the soidos. Kabbalah refers to Maaseh Bereishis and Maaseh Merkava. Meiser Bereshis are the secrets. How was the world created? Meiser Merkava, and I view that sort of science. They didn't have chemistry and biochemistry and geology and all that. So, but Meiser Bereshis are the secrets of how the world was created. Meiser Merkava, what Esti is asking about, the vision that Yechezkel sees a chariot, and there are wheels and eventually a throne and what looks like the picture of a person, etc., etc. So this is what people spend their 100 years studying Kabbalah, Meiser Merkava. I've never studied Kabbalah. I can't tell. So there's deep meanings. They're spiritual meanings. We know the Rambam says that Hashem is not physical. He's not corporeal. So all of these are descriptions that are supposed to mean attributes of Hashem, chesed, gevura, compassion, power. They're not physical things, but you need Meiser Merkava. You need to be taught one. The Gemara says you can only be taught these secrets by one Rebbe, person to person. They did not lecture on this in the yeshiva. In the Gemara, you have to have a Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had Rabbi Akiva who taught him. You know what I'm saying? You have to have one-to-one person. These concepts were given to people. The Kabbalistic concepts have come down to us through Hasidic works. The Maharal does not openly discuss Kabbalah, but he discusses a lot of various spiritual aspects about Hashem, which most people think are influenced by some of these concepts. So the vision of Yechezkel is something that has to be studied for a long time. It's not, as you say, Esti, it's a complicated issue. But we're going to learn the visions of Daniel and the various explanations that Rashi gives, and the Even Ezra, and the Abarbanel, and the later commentaries as to what they mean for us. How does it mean Rome, and why does this vision mean Greece, and why did this vision mean Rome? So for us, we'll be able to get out of it what I think is relevant for us. But you can see that our Meforshim are debating this concept. Is he a Navi? Is he not a Navi? So it's not so clear. He's like Shmuel, like what the Rambam said. He's like David and Shlomo that did their work in Ruach HaKodesh. We see that Yaakov Avinu also gathered his sons to give them a bracha when he was going to die. And between every parsha, as a Balkorah can tell you, between every parsha and parsha, you see 9 letter break. It's ptuchos and stumos, openings and closings. So between certain prokim, it's just 3 letters. Sometimes you have 9 letters. So usually it's between parshios, it's 9 letters. Between Parshas Vayigash and Parshas Vayechi, there is no separation at all. It's called sosum. It's closed. And one of the explanations given is, in that Parsha, Yaakov Avinu wanted to Bikesh Yaakov legalos esaketz. Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal the end of times. When is Mashiach coming? And then all of a sudden, the Ruach HaKodesh was taken away from Yaakov Avinu. And he just gave the tribes blessings. So here we're going to see as well that Daniel is also, it's closed off from him. Sosam advarim v'chosam hasefer ad eid kates. So there's a parallelism between Daniel and Yaakov. Yecheskel in Perek Yud Daled talks about three special tzaddikim: Noach, Daniel, and Iyuv. What is the common denominator between those three? Atzara Shavish Bem. By the way, one of my resources, some of you may have, this is the Tanakh put out by the Mossad Rav Kook. I have all of the Sifrei Tanakh from the Mossad Rav Kook, and it's okay. And I would encourage you. There's a long mavo, there's a long introduction. And some of the things we're talking about tonight, I've taken from this Mossad Rav Kook. So if you have it, you can look at it in detail. By the way, I want to show while I'm okay. Just as we start learning, I want to give you the resources. Number one, there's a new art scroll Ksuvim. It has Ezra, it has Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. So I would recommend that. Could you give me the other thing? No, that. No, bring me that. The blue. Yes.
So many here.
Okay. This is the Mikros Gedolos, also put out by Art Scroll in Hebrew. But this has all of the important Meforshim we're going to go through. Rashi, Even Ezra, the Ralbag, the Malbim, Rav Sadia Gaon, Midrash Daniel. So virtually all of the important, and then there's Likutei Shasu, Midrash, so all the Torah Shabbal Peh. Throughout Chazal, the Midrashim, the Gemara, that are quoted pasuk by pasuk, is in this Mikros, because I will be using this primarily. You can also, this is also Daniel, this is also Art Scroll, but I think the newer one, this is an older version on the Art Scroll Tanakh series. This is the Zucker edition of the Ksuvim, is probably a little bit more up to date. And then if you have the Mossad Rav Kook, I will be referring to some of that as well.
What's that?
No, that's Aspeclary. That okay. So we talked about that Yechezkel speaks about three special tzaddikim, Noach, Daniel, and Iyuv. Hatzara Shavash ben Shirau Olam Banui. They saw a built civilization. Charav, it was destroyed. Vishuv Banui. So Noach, of course, he was in the world, it got destroyed, it got rebuilt. Daniel b'tzi'irato ra'ata baita rishon b'binyano. I told you, Daniel was taken during the reign of Yehoiakim when he was 15 years old by Nebuchadnezzar, when Nebuchadnezzar first came to Yerushalayim and started taking, like we said, the Cherish and the Mazger. We learned at the end of the Malachim, 10,000 Talmidei Chachamim were taken immediately. The whole Sanhedrin was taken and brought to Bavel, which we said laid the groundworks for Talmud Bavli. So Daniel certainly saw the bias, the first bias. Uvia Mavaya Churban. Of course, in his day, there was the Churban. But he, V'huerich Yamim Uviziknuto Ra'at Habayit Hasheni. The Gemara, the Medrash in Tanchuma will tell us that he saw the building of the Bayis Sheni. We don't have in Chazal specific dates when he was born, when he died. But from what we have, he lived about 100 years. Who was Daniel? He was from the Bnei Yehuda. So was Hanani, Mishael, Azariah. We're going to see, as we go through the Psukim, that Daniel was likely from Beis David. And we're going to learn a Gemara tonight. I think with that we'll conclude. Those of us in the Daf Yomi learned it yesterday. Sanhedrin Tzadi Gimel. It goes all the way back to Rus, the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. That after Rus works in the field, Boaz gives her sheish hasoorima ele, gives her 6 barley sheaves. V'chidarko shel Boaz litin matana sheish ha'orim. Is that the Boaz is the Gadol Ador? Boaz was Moshe Feinstein, is his generation. He's going to give 6 barley? Ela remez ramazlo. Boaz was giving a remez to Rus. Sha'atidin shisha bonim lotzes mimena shemizbarchim b'sheish brachos. Rus is going to have 6 children, and each one are going to be blessed with 6 brachos. For Eluhain, David, Mashiach, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. We're talking about Ruth Samaviyah, who was the mother of the Malchus. In the Medrash Maisa Daniel, it says that Daniel was one of the sons of Yechonia Melech. So that comes out, fulfills that Daniel is part of the Beis Yehuda, of Malchus Yehuda. In a Nevuah to Yeshayahu about Chizkiah Melech, it says, Umi banecha yikachu, your children will be taken, vayu sarisim beichal melech Bavel. They will be a saris. Now, the Gemara argues there, what does a saris mean? A saris means somebody was castrated. To work in a harem of a king, they didn't allow you unless you were castrated. By the way, people were paid vast amounts of money to do that. That's one of the reasons there's an Isser of Tzuadaka, the sefer that I wrote about, genital mutilation, that the reason why the Torah is so severe and doesn't allow you to do chuppah v'kiddushin with someone who became a Tzuadaka, because it was considered terrible to do this. And that one opinion is Shasir se Melech Bavel Kadesh Yishasu Beicholo, for the right to work as an officer. For Nebuchadnezzar, you had to subject to castration. Oh, sheniskanu kach al shem shenistar savodah bimeim. There's an opinion Chazal that they really didn't become castrated. They were, in their time, avodah zarah was weakened. There was Kiddush Hashem. Hanan Mishael Azariah went into the furnace and they were saved. So there was a lot of feeling among the Goyim to get rid of avodah zarah and just to believe in Hashem. I just want to conclude with something else. 1 second. Who wrote Sefer Daniel? So I said the accepted opinion. The Gra says in his explanation of Mishlei that Anshe Knesset Agdola Chibru Kol Navim Vaksuvim Al Seder, and they were the ones who sort of put a stempel, and that we can't have any more Sforim. However, Daniel sort of he saw these things, he heard these things. And Anshe Knesset Agdola sort of gathered this material to write it. It doesn't say in the Ksuvim that Ani Daniel Kasavidze. So we learned all of the brises that we talked about. We learned the Rambam, that it seems that it was the Anshe Knesset Agdola who ended up writing Sefer Daniel. Who was the last of the Anshe Knesset Agdola? Shimon HaTzadik. So according to Shimon HaTzadik, had an encounter with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died 323 BCE. Based on even though we say 586 BC, now they say it's 420, because remember there's 166 years missing. So the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed 420 BCE. So 70 years they were in Galus, 350. Anshe Knesset Gdola. So we can see that it works according to this history that Shimon HaTzadik would have been around at the time of Alexander the Great, because he was sort of the last one who remained from the Anshe Knesset Gdola. What was the Anshe Knesset Gdola? It was who was part of that? Great Nevi'im. We have Mordechai, Malachi, Chagai, Zechariah, Ezra, Sofer. So there were Nevi'im in the Anshe Knesset Gdola. And what does it say at the beginning of Pirkei Avos? Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, Masrul Yoshua, Yoshua l'Zkenim, Zkenim Nevi'im, Nevi'im Masrul Anshe Knesset Gdola. And what Nevi'im? Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. They were part of the Anshe Knesset Gdola. That's the Nevi'im that gave it to the Anshe Knesset Gdola. Who else? Zerubbabel, who was the secular leader. Nehemiah, Sarya, Ra'alia, Mordechai Bilshan, who was Mordechai. Lama Nikru Anshe Knesset Gdola. It says in Gemara Yuma, Shehem Ayu Knisya Gdola Kedusha Shechzarnu Ator Liyoshna. They were a great convention that brought holiness back. Okay. Zerubbabel. Yes. So we're going to learn about Zerubbabel when we learn Ezra and Nehemiah. Any comments? This is one long introduction. We will start our usual, pasuk by pasuk, going through, starting next week. But I felt it was important to sort of give us these concepts. Was he a Navi? What is Ksuvim as it relates to Nevi'im? We got a little bit of an answer of that, and we've cited who wrote it, and we'll get more into it as we go pasuk by pasuk. Any comments, questions, or oros? Any question, whatever you might have in terms of placing Daniel or whatever.
When Anshe Knesset Gdola ended,
So Shimon HaTzadik is the last person. And then after Shimon HaTzadik, you have Antignos Isocho, and then there's no Anshe Knesset Gdola. Then there's an Av Bezdin and a Nossi. That period, that ends the Anshe Knesset Gdola.
when it started.
So we'll see. Ezra comes back 70 years after the Golus. So you're talking about 350 BCE. And it lasted for about 30 years, 30, 40 years. Well, think about the Constitutional Convention of the United States was also a gathering, and they wrote the Constitution. So they gathered in 1783. It took them 4 years, 1787, they had a constitution. So here the Anshe Knesset Gdola operated, if we say it operated for 30, 40 years, that's a lot. I think we'll get more insight into that as we go through Ezra and Nehemiah, where we'll have a full discussion of the functioning of Anshe Knesset Gdola. Remember, Anshe Knesset Gdola created Rabbinic Judaism. We say Shmona Esrei was written by Anshe Knesset Gdola. Prior to that, when you went to daven, you davened anything you wanted to say. There was no matbeya. There was no coinage of tefillah. But when they came back after being in Bavel for 70 years, you'll see, Daniel is written in Aramaic. They didn't know how to read Hebrew. So Anshe Knesset Gdola had to write a matbeya, a standard text to say Shmona Esrei, and all of our davening. So we can say that Anshe Knesset Gdola formatted Rabbinic Judaism the way we practice it today. Anshe Knesset Gdola started the project of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of writing it down, right? Ezra Sofer Ezra is commented to as one of the Tanoim. So is Shimon HaTzadik. So is Antignos Isocho. We don't have Torah Sheba'al Peh prior to them. So the Anshe Knesset Gdola, and they codified the Sifrei Tanakh. These are it, and no more others. So, for example, Sefer HaMakkabim. There is a Sefer HaMakkabim. It's not in Tanakh. There is Ben Sira, who lived about 200 BCE. They say was the son of Yirmiyahu. And he wrote a lot of wisdom, but it's not included in Tanakh. These are called the Apocrypha. The Christians have codified some of our books, like they have the book of Maccabees, and they have Ben Sira, and they have other books.
Do we have the book of Maccabees?
We have them, but they're not in our Tanakh. The Christians study those.
The book
And
of Judith, no? Judith?
Judith, absolutely, Tobin, and Judith, there's other books. Those are called the Apocrypha. Oh, I'm sure Professor Bronner knew all of that because there is a lot of wisdom
did.
to learn from them. The Gemara quotes Ben Sira a number of times. Those in the Daf Yomi will remember, but it's not one of the 24 books. So the Anshe Knesset Gola said, these are the books and nothing else. And as you can see, they wrote some of the books. They had received how they got the material from Daniel. Well, Daniel was around Ezra Sofer. So Ezra Sofer, that they were part of the ones who wrote down the various maros of Daniel.
What time next
Alright.
week?
8 o'clock.
On Sunday?
On Sunday?
Night, 8 o'clock.